Hello and welcome to Hippo CMMS. My name is Earl Mina and I work with the training and tech support team with Hippo. Today's webinar is titled Start Building Your Inventory Now. Here's a look at today's agenda. We will start with a quick introduction, then begin our tutorial. Topics that we will discuss today include how to create a part, how to add parts to work orders, how to associate parts to equipment, how to transfer parts between facilities, parts on Hippo Mobile, reporting on parts from desktop, and finish up with data integration services that are offered from our Hippo support team. At the end of the webinar, there will be a short survey that will follow where you can answer a few questions and also ask any of your own. You are also welcome to use the question bubble on your screen to ask a question. These questions will be answered after the webinar. Now, before we begin, I just want to mention that all attendees will be muted. This webinar, however, is recorded, and we will be sending a copy to all attendees and those who have registered. So let's begin. Hippo CMMS is equipped with an inventory management system. This allows users to store valuable information about their parts, such as part names, part numbers, quantity on hand, storage locations, and much more. By adding parts to your Hippo database, you are able to attach parts on work orders, such as maintenance for a particular piece of equipment. You can keep an accurate track of inventory levels and get a perspective on how much you are spending on parts within a given time period by using the report system in Hippo. Hippo parts are available on both desktop and mobile, and our webinar today will cover both platforms. But let's first begin by looking at parts on desktop. This is my login screen. Some of you might be noticing this extra button at the bottom. This is for anyone who has integrated single sign-on. If that's part of your organization, please let us know. We'd love to simplify the login procedure for you. For most users, they do have a login process that consists of a user ID and password. So I'll go ahead and type in my user ID and my password. Now the type of user that I'm signing in with is one who has access to full access to my system. I'm an enterprise admin. I can manage users, look at all the facilities within my enterprise. For our demo today, I've set up Hippo Plant and Hippo Arena. We don't have much to do at the enterprise level, so let's go directly into the Hippo Plant. Now my parts and inventory list is stored under the panel called Facility Admin. This is the panel where you can reference all of your equipment, all of your locations. It's also where you create your scheduled work orders. For our training today, we'll go into the parts grid and learn how to add parts to your Hippo database. Okay, so this is the parts grid. Like any grid, depending on your permissions, you have control buttons located in the top right corner. The plus icon allows me to add a part to my Hippo database. The delete icon is the trash icon in the middle. I can select a part and hit delete to remove it from this list. And anytime I'm adding or editing or making any changes, it's important to make note of the save button. If you're spending a lot of time in here, you don't want to input many parts. If your browser unexpectedly closes, you lose all of that data. So let's begin by hitting the plus button. This is going to open up a new field at the top of the grid. There are 3 mandatory fields that have to be added when you're adding a part. They are name, part type, and work category. As you can see, I've got a couple example parts listed here already. Some belts, some filters, bearings, quite a bit of different parts here. So let's go ahead and add one part. Maybe I have a 10-inch belt. I'll click in the type field. We'll type in the name of the part. Next is part type. Part type refers to what is the physical part itself. Is it a belt, is it a filter, or is it a bearing? So as you can see in the first part of the name, we distinguish if it was a 10-inch, 12-inch, 15-inch belt. Part type will be all the same. Belt, brake pad, headlight. If you do not have a part type within this list, you can click the blue plus button. This will give you a new window, and you can add your part type right from this window here. Now, in terms of cutting down this part type list, or anything that's considered a type or category in Hippo, for those of you who have admin privileges, any of those can be modified in the categories and types dropdown. For our example today, this is quite simple. We'll call it a belt. And then our last mandatory field is work category. Work category is seen as in many places in Hippo. It's seen on demand work orders, scheduled work orders. The purpose of adding a part to a work category, which you'll see in a little bit, is when you come down to the demand work order or work order screen, instead of going through a long list and searching by part name or part number, you'll be able to search for a work category and really narrow down the items that you're looking for. Keeping in line with the rest of my belts here, let's just go ahead and assign it to general maintenance. This list is quite lengthy, so I'll use the search field to find the category that I want to use. So those are the three mandatory fields. I'll hit save at this point so I keep that data locked in. Now you definitely want to make use of the other columns that appear on this grid. The more that you add to this grid, the more information you get, especially if you decide to use Hippo Mobile and you're managing parts from your phone or your tablet. It's much better for you to see the part numbers, names, all the information you had entered at the beginning of your parts implementation. Now going from left to right, the first optional category is subcategory. Subcategory is a more specific type of work category. For example, if this was general maintenance, you can select a subcategory like electrical, boiler room. These ones are quite broad, but it's a way of just categorizing a more specific type of work or a more specific category for a part. The next column is image. In addition to adding information about the part, you can upload a picture of that part. You can visually see if you're selecting the right part to use for a work order. To upload a part, hover over the image column, double click in this field, and you'll see a edit button appear. Click on the edit button, and this will pull up the upload window. Click the upload button, and you can select the image from your desktop. So there's my image of the belt. I can hit save, and I've added the image to my part information. The next column is part number. Many of you might reference your part by part number. I've seen some users enter the part number into the part name. It really comes down to what you're comfortable with. This is a type field, so you can go ahead and type in the number that you categorize or catalog the part by. We'll hit save. Okay, moving along, we have associated type and associations. I'm going to skip these two columns. We'll come back to it after we look at the demand work order that we can assign this part to. Let's go ahead and move over to storage location. This is where you're storing the part. So the part is located in my Hippo plant, but it is in a specific location. I can click in this type field and I can say parts room. Next field is description. Sometimes description can be the name. So I can just copy this information and paste it into this field. Or if you've got directions how you want this part to be utilized, you can also add that in there as well. Manufacturer, who makes the part. Manufacturing number, if that applies. And supplier, so who do you get this part from? The next column is transfer. This allows you to transfer parts between multiple facilities. For example, if you work in manufacturing and you're transferring like a disc or a bearing to another plant, you can click to transfer and it'll appear in the other facility. I will do a demo of that when we come back to this after we've entered our part. So keep an eye on this a little bit later. Now, the last four columns are also very important. This is where you update and enter the quantity that you have on hand. So how many of these belts do you have within your facility? Let's say that I have 10 of these, 10 quantity on hand. Minimum quantity, this is how many you should have on hand at minimum. I would like to have at least 5 on hand. And then desired quantity is how many you desire to order each time you hit your minimum quantity. Now, within the user permissions, you can enable a user to get an email when your part hits the minimum quantity level. For example, I have 10 quantity on hand. If I consume 5 of those parts, I'll get an email notifying me that my 10-inch belt has reached minimum quantity, and within that email, it'll tell me that I need to order a desired quantity of whatever value I put here. So just based off the math, I'll likely put in 5. So I have 10 in stock. I use 5 of them and my quantity now is at 5. And I'll get that email telling me to order another 5 when that time comes. For those of you who are tracking parts cost, whether that's just individual parts or what you've consumed on work orders, this is the column that will help you track that information to unit cost. So how much does each of these individual belts cost? We can say each of these belts cost $15. So I'd have $150 worth of parts, 10-inch belts currently in stock. That's 10 times 15. So those are the fields that you can utilize when you're adding a part. Again, we didn't go over the associated type and association, but I will come back to that after we look at the work order. The purpose is I want to show you how to manually add a part to a work order versus automatically assigning it. Let's hit save. Always look for the green save icon in the top left corner. That'll tell you if your data has saved or not. And if it has saved, you can safely click the X icon and that'll return you back to your facility screen. Now, hopefully you're familiar with how to submit demand work orders. Work orders are submitted through this button here, Submit Work Order. Now, a part is not added to a work order before that work order has generated. By generated, I mean a work order that has been generated or created. We'll have a ticket number. It'll have things like a created date, a due date. What we're looking at right now is basically just an empty form where you proceed to enter the information and then submit the work order. On the right side, we have a list of demand work orders, and then we have a list of PMs. So the first example we'll maybe use is the demand work order. We'll click the drop-down menu to open up this list. And we can open up any one of these tickets. We'll say 39014. It looks like this work order was actually waiting for parts. This is one of the statuses that you can use if you're waiting for a part on a work order, putting something on hold. It looks like a user had created this a while back. They were waiting for some parts. And based on the description, it says use the part on the work order to fix the machine. Now, with the generated work order, you're able to scroll down and see some additional fields. For example, who is the person that is working on the work order, any invoice information that is usually related to like an outside vendor, or any extra labor charges that you bought for the work order. And then we have the parts section. Now, as you can see, there already is a part associated to this work order. That comes from the parts grid and the associated type and association columns that I did not go through, but we will go back to that. We've added a 10-inch belt, so I'd like to show you now how to add that 10-inch belt to the work order. Click on the blue Add button. This will open up the parts window. And to find your part, you have a couple of options here. You can search for the part by looking by part name. So hitting the drop-down arrow will show you a list of all your parts. Now, I've got a lot of parts in this list here. The search field is definitely helpful. I could type in simply 10-inch. That'll narrow my search results. Alternatively, I showed you earlier that work category was a mandatory item, a mandatory field that needed to be completed on the parts grid. I can narrow my search by hitting the drop-down menu and selecting general maintenance. So these are all of the parts that fall under general maintenance. Very simple. I've got 3 results instead of the 50 that were initially there. And when I select the 10-inch belt, I've got the part number that I can verify with, the quantity on hand, and also where the part is located. Now that I've gathered the part, the only remaining step is to indicate the quantity that you've used. So I've used 1. I'll hit OK. And as you can see, I have just added 1 belt to this demand work order. So that's manual addition, going into the parts list and manually adding the part to the work order. Now, to jump back to the automatic addition, for example, this 12-inch belt, how did this 12-inch belt appear on this work order? We'll hit save and go back to the parts grid. Under facility admin, click on parts. And let's look at that 12-inch belt. So the 12-inch belt is the second item on my list. And I'll scroll over to look at the associated type and associations. So when you're assigning a part to equipment, the part actually gets associated to the equipment model. The reason is you may have, let's say, many pieces of equipment. For example, you might have 10 air compressors. They may fall under the air compressor Atlas Copco equipment model. Instead of assigning this 12-inch belt to every single one of those air compressors, when you simply assign it to the equipment model, the system will automatically apply it to each one of those air compressors to save you the work and time of assigning it to the other ones. Now, working off this grid, it's a little bit difficult to tell what my equipment name is. Many people don't really refer to their equipment by their equipment model. They'll know it better by like air compressor number 1, air compressor number 2. So a way to get around this that I find very useful is to utilize another grid after I've added all my parts into the database. So a nice trick I'd like to show you is to go to the equipment model grid. The equipment model grid is useful because it has 3 columns that'll tell me a little bit about my equipment and a little bit about my parts. The first one is name. What is the equipment model name? And if I scroll over to the right, there's a column for parts and there's a column for equipment. Now, after I've added all my parts into the system, what I would do from this point is drag over the equipment column. Okay. And I'll also drag over the parts column. Now, as you can see, I've got the equipment model name, I've got the individual piece of equipment, and I've got the parts. So I've nicely laid out these 3 columns beside each other. It'll make life a little bit easier in terms of assigning parts to a particular piece of equipment. So let's go ahead and use that 10-inch belt. and assign it to one of my equipment here. Maybe we can use the air compressor number 5 as an example. We'll click in the parts column. This will show me a list of all my parts. We'll select 10-inch belt, and then I'll hit save. So anytime that I run a work order on air compressor number 5, whether that's a demand work order or a scheduled work order, the 10-inch belt will appear as a recommended part. As an example, let's hit submit work order. I'll type in a work order name. Let's say emergency repair for air compressor. My air compressor is an equipment, so I'll select the equipment as type. And in my drop-down menu, I'll use my search and type in number 5. Oh, it looks like that didn't work very well. Well, here it is actually, air compressor number 5. Great. From this screen, I can also verify what parts are going to be appearing on the work order by clicking on the equipment name. This is the equipment detail screen. It's an excellent screen that will tell you a lot of information about your specific equipment. For example, I've got parts. If I wanted to get a preview on maybe what parts are coming to my work order or that I should use, I can click on the name and it'll appear here. So back to the demand work order. I'm going to go ahead and type in a description. This is the last mandatory field. So emergency belt fix on air compressor. And I'll hit submit. Great. So my work order has been submitted. I can hit the X icon on this grid to go back to my facility screen. And at the top is the demand work order that I just created. So let's click on the name, open up the work order, and we'll scroll down to the bottom here. As you can see, the 10-inch belt that I've associated to the air compressor appears on any work orders that I create for the air compressor. However, it doesn't mean that I have to indicate the part. So use this as a reference list first to know what parts are always associated to repairs on your piece of equipment. But just know a part doesn't get consumed until you hit the edit button and indicate that you've used a specific quantity for that work order. All right, so that is first how to add a part to your Hippo, how to add it manually to a work order. This is how to automatically add a part to a work order based off its association with an equipment. The last area we have to look at on desktop is how to transfer parts between facilities. Now, some of you may have many facilities within your Hippo enterprise, and within those facilities, you may be borrowing parts, transferring parts between facility A or B. There is a way to do that in Hippo. So let's hit cancel, and we'll go back to the facility admin, parts grid. And if you had recalled earlier, I mentioned there was a column that said parts transfer. This allows you to transfer a part between facility A and facility B. So I've got 10 of these belts in my Hippo plant. I'll hit click to transfer because I want to send some over to my other facility. This is the parts transfer window. I can select the other facility within my enterprise, and I can choose to send X number of parts over. So why don't I go ahead and send 3 of these parts? We'll hit transfer. Now always confirm you have success or save in the top left corner. We can close this grid. And let's go back to our other facility by making use of the breadcrumb trail. That's clicking on the enterprise name. And I can select Hippo Arena. Again, our parts are stored under facility admin and parts. I'm now in the Hippo Arena parts list, much shorter than the other one. Maybe I can suggest that this is a new facility that I'm just onboarding and my parts implementation is at the very beginning. But more importantly, you can see that I've added the 10-inch belt. It's populated the same information that I entered initially, part number, the type, um, the description, manufacturing number, and our main goal was to move 3 parts over from the Hippo plant over to the Hippo arena, and I've successfully moved 3 quantity on hand. Now, it doesn't populate minimum quantity or desired quantity. Um, Maybe it's the process is a little bit different over in my Hippo arena, but more importantly, you have the quantity on hand that you intended to transfer over. So that's a look at all the modules of parts on desktop. I think now is a great time for us to jump into Hippo Mobile. Hippo Mobile is a faster mobile way of managing your work orders. It has a wonderful parts module, so let's jump into that now. So here's a look at my login page from my mobile. It does look the same as my desktop. I can follow the same login procedure, user ID and password. Let's go ahead and type in our credential. This is the first time that you're seeing Hippo Mobile. I do recommend you have an opportunity to watch our previous month's webinar that's in our support center. It's an overview on how to use Hippo Mobile and manage your work orders. This is my enterprise dashboard. I can see what facilities I'm associated to. It's a summary of what's going on. Now, notice there were way more work orders when we were on the desktop. The perspective I'm seeing right now is just show own. If you are someone who needs to see all the work orders, you can change your view to show all, and you can have full information on all the work orders that are within your database. These are open work orders. They're not closed. With mobile, you have access to any open, and for completed work orders, it's best to use the reports or the work order search that you can find on desktop. Now, that's all work order related. The primary objective of today is to look at parts. So your main menu in the top left corner, these 3 horizontal lines will show you all of the features that are available from your mobile device for Hippo. We're concerned with parts, so let's go ahead and click on the parts panel to open up our parts menu. Great. So this is a simplified version of the parts grid that we see on desktop. At the top, you can select what facility you want to work within. I can choose between Hippo Plant and Hippo Arena. I've got more parts in Hippo Plant, so let's remain in this facility. You can look at each individual part. Click on the drop-down arrow, and it'll tell you things like part number, how many you have on hand, how many you've used, your part type, what work category. If you wanted to edit that part, the edit button is this green icon. Clicking on the green icon will open up the parts window. And then if you have permission to edit that part, you can change things like name, any of the fields that you saw on desktop, association included. I'd like to go through parts addition from scratch on mobile. So we'll go ahead and cancel this screen. We won't make any changes. And let's return back to our main parts page. I'm going to jump to Hippo Arena. Now, if you're someone who's building your parts inventory, and maybe you're in the parts room and you're away from your desktop and computer, you can actually add the part right from your mobile. Hit the blue plus icon to open up the Add Part window. Just follow the same steps as you would on desktop. Begin by typing in the name of the part. Maybe we'll call this a 22-inch belt. What part type are we using? Belt. Next, we'll select the work category. We'll keep this nice and simple. Let's just select parts in-house. From here, I can choose a file and take a picture with my mobile device. For today, I'm using an emulator, so I can't show you the camera from my desktop. But if you're using an iPhone or if you're using an Android device, You could simply take a picture with your mobile. It's best to take it in a landscape format so it appears in the right format when you get it to your Hippo. But you can take a picture of your part right from your phone. Much faster to do that than uploading pictures right from your desktop. Part number, again, this is a type field. Association, we know that we can assign it to the equipment model of the air compressor. I'm going to leave this one blank. Storage location in my Hippo Arena. This is located in the parts room as well. A description, we'll call this 22-inch belt. Who is the manufacturer? Manufacturing number. Supplier. As you can see, this is really the same information, the same steps and workflow that you follow off the desktop. So if you have a lot of experience entering parts on your desktop and you want to move over to mobile for a faster experience, it's the same workflow, not too much training and learning you have to do. The quantity, we'll put in, let's say, another 15. Minimum, I'll say 5. So each time I want to order 10. All right, unit cost, maybe we'll say this is $19 a part. Let's hit save to add that 22-inch belt to our inventory. And there we are. We've got our part information here. What's interesting to see, if you look above the 12 by 12 filter, this says used for all HVAC filters. Whoever had entered this part did a fantastic job. I think I'm going to click edit here to show you some information that they put in. Description. They put used for all HVAC units. So instead of typing just the name of the part, you can be descriptive on the purpose of that part's use. I think that would be very, very helpful for your maintenance team to understand if this part is going to be used for this purpose or not. So with our part added from mobile, it's a good time to take an opportunity to look at how to utilize that part on mobile. We'll click the Hippo icon at the top of the page. For this demo, let's go into Hippo Arena. And I'm not seeing any work orders, so I'd like to change this to show all. I'll just open up any work order here. Let's say hot water tank. This is a PM. I'll hit edit. Now, if this is the first time that you're seeing how to close a work order on mobile, same steps as you would on desktop. You have a status field where you can indicate the current status of the work order. In this example, we're going to complete the work order for the hot water tank. We can add a comment here. Completed the work. See the parts that I used. Now under Show More, this is where you have the additional fields. Many of these fields are not mandatory unless you're a resource or if you have some tasks, but you can add things like company information, email. Let's go a little bit further down. There are some tasks I need to complete. And here we are. So this is the parts list. The equipment on this work order are associated to these parts. That's why they appear automatically. Now for us, we want to manually add that 22-inch belt that we just put into our inventory. We'll click the Add button. Again, we can search by work category. We can make use of the entire parts list by name, but let's generalize it to parts in house and select the 22-inch belt. Same information as desktop. You can see the part number, parts room, quantity on hand. This is a great example. You're on the go, you're walking around your facility, and you don't know where the part is or which one you're looking for. And this information tells you right in the palm of your hands. Now I'm going to use one of these parts. We'll hit OK. And here we are. For this work order, I've used one part, and I'll hit Save. And the work order has now been completed. So that was a look at parts on Hippo Mobile. Let's now jump back to desktop to take a look at some of the parts reporting that we offer, specifically tracking your parts cost on maintenance history reports, and then utilizing the inventory report to keep track of all the parts that you have in stock. All right, we're back on desktop now. I'm at my enterprise screen. Now, parts information is what you'll find in a facility level report. So we'll go into Hippo Arena, click on the reports panel, and anytime that a part is consumed, it's consumed on a completed work order. So you'll find that data in the maintenance history tab. There's a lot of filters that you can select, but for the purpose of today, we'll keep things wide open. However, I will make use of the completed date range. This will narrow our search to a window of time that we select. So I'm concerned with work orders that were done between the 8th and 15th of July. We'll hit the Generate Report button, and now I have a graphical view of the report that I'm searching for. So open this up. In terms of parts, where you want to look for parts information in the report would be in one of the first graphs called costing. This graph will show you labor costs, which are in yellow, parts costs, which are in blue, invoice, which is in red. Based on this time period, the only cost that I've accumulated for work orders is parts. So I've accumulated $19 in parts. That comes from the work order that we just completed. You remember that 22-inch belt cost $19. Now, if you run a report without graphical views, the information is also presented in table format. Now, as I scroll further below, these are the work orders that are within my search criteria. Here is that work order we closed out, the PM with the 22-inch belt. It says here that I've used quantity of 1 and the parts cost of $19. As we scroll further down into the report, there's some additional information that lists parts. For example, the cost section will tell you, again, how much you've used for parts, $19. I can scroll further below. And the very last table is for the parts itself. So within this period, I've only used one part. Type was belt, the number, and then quantity used. Now, in addition to tracking parts costs, you can also track your parts inventory in a report. We can close this out and click on the inventory option. There's an inventory report you can run at the enterprise to view parts at within both facilities, or if you're in the facility, your report will just encompass the parts within that specific facility. Your options are searching for parts at below or minimum quantity only, or based on a minimum quantity hand, so at least X amount. You can search by part number, search by part category, part types, by what model it's associated to, by what model type, and maybe even a vehicle. Let's leave this wide open and simply just generate the report. We'll hit the part icon. And actually, let's step back and go to another facility. Let's go back to the Hippo plant. If you recall, I have more parts within that facility. It'd be a better example for us today. Inventory, and we'll just hit the generate report. So this is the complete part list. Every single part that's in my list here. Every single part that appears in the parts grid. It's very easy to read at this level. In this report, I can see part name, quantity on hand. These columns are sortable, so you can see which part has the most quantity. Now, how you can best utilize this parts report. If you're someone who manages, month-to-month levels, and you do want a report of what parts you currently have in stock, you can set up automated reports within Hippo. hit the plus icon. This will ask you to name the report. We can call this monthly parts report. Right. Now, at the top here, you can see this table will show you any reports that you've saved, and those saved reports can be scheduled. I can hit the schedule button. When you're scheduling your report, you can choose to have it sent on a week-to-week or monthly basis. In this example, I have a monthly report. I'll hit monthly, and I can say, send me my parts list every month on the first Monday of the month. I can indicate who this should be sent to. I can also CC anyone who may also need to see this information. So a parts manager at hippo.com. Right, so I'll hit OK. I can expect to get a report every month on my inventory. So that was a tutorial on parts in Hippo CMMS. Now, before we wrap up today, let's discuss some options for adding your complete parts list into your system. As you saw, adding parts to Hippo is a simple process, but what happens if you have a long list of parts to add to your database? While adding parts is simple, adding thousands of parts can be time-consuming. Hippo support offers data integration services where we can lend a hand and help import parts to your system quickly. The process is also very easy. Fill out a simple spreadsheet with a list of your parts, send it to Hippo support, and we can import it into your database. If you are interested in learning more about how this works, getting a quote, or some additional training on how to use parts, please contact us at support@hippocmms.com. Your request will go to our support team, and we'd love to hear from you. So this brings us to the end of the webinar presentation for today. Just a reminder, there will be a set of questions that will follow the webinar. Feel free to leave some feedback, send in some questions of your own, and our support team will be happy to respond after the webinar. This webinar has been recorded, and all attendees and registrants will be sent a copy. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, and I hope you continue to enjoy using your Hippo CMMS.